phishing sites staying around for 8 weeks, 10 weeks. I mean, there are always sites which continue on and on. And this could happen for a number of reasons. This could be because the hosting ISP is just not cooperative. This could also just be because the bank is not aware of it. They've moved on to new ones. But regardless, what you have here is a very skewed distribution. In fact, I did some curve fitting, which shows that this actually follows a log normal distribution, which is a particular type of skewed distribution. So the main thing to take here is that you have a small but substantial number of sites which last for very long, which skew the performance of the response of the average case. So that's how long the sites stick around for. The next thing to consider is, okay, so who cares if a site is available if we don't know how many people are visiting it? And through a bit of a trick, we were able to count in a number of cases how many visitors a phishing website received. And I don't know if you're familiar with Webalizer, but it's one of the freely available web page statistics packages. And in fact, Webalizer is often exploited to host phishing sites as well. But it gives you a nice daily update of how many URLs, or how many visits you've had to each particular URL, how many unique visits. And so, fortunately, a lot of the times you will find that Webalizer is left in a world readable state. So anyone who goes to the URL can see the statistics. Okay, so what we started doing is every time we got a phishing URL, we went and looked to see whether or not it was running Webalizer and if it was world readable. And we found several hundred cases where it was so. And so we continued going back to get day-by-day snapshots of how many visitors have gone to the phishing URL. Kind of cool. That gave us an estimate of how many people were visiting the sites. But then we don't even know necessarily whether or not people are visiting the sites because they are giving away their details, or maybe they're just saying, die spammer, die, we hate you, and this sort of thing. So to deal with that, we also found a number of cases where the user details were hosted on the phishing sites in text files, which were also world readable. And so we had about 400 phishing responses, and so we found that half of them appeared legitimate, and the other half clearly were not. So we can use that to combine with our Webalizer stats to give us a more accurate picture of how many of the visits are likely to be legitimate. So this is a day-by-day distribution of the number of unique responses. It kind of fluctuates a lot because of the data source, but you see some days, even all the way up to the 5th day, you can still have around 20 unique user responses to the phishing URL. And this is not just that you visited the phishing page URL. This is that you've gone through to the thank you page where you've actually filled in some details. So yes, so we know we've got an estimate of how many sites there are. We've got an estimate of how long they seem to stick around for. And we also have a separate estimate of about how many users tend to give away their details day by day. So we can sort of put it all together and come up with a very quick and dirty estimate of what the overall cost is to phishing. So we observed 1,438 websites and phishing websites in 8 weeks, which implies around 10,000 per annum. This, I believe, is a significant undercount, but we'll stick with it for now. We have 61 hours as the averaged lifetime, which using this graph implies around 30 victims per site. Gartner have done a study on identity theft. They surveyed the banks, asked how much money do you tend to lose to identity theft. It's not specific to phishing, but so the estimate is cost estimate's less than ideal, but it's all we have. They estimate that the banks actually end up losing around $572 per victim. They actually lose more than this. They lose around $1,700, I believe, but they recover a lot of that, and only $542 they actually lose and never recover. So you multiply this together, you end up with $160 million for the estimated cost here. This does not include the rockfish attacks, which I was just talking to you about, because it's hard. You have to count them differently because they have unique domains and this sort of thing. So, as a first pass, our best way of estimating them is that we know that the rockfish account for 50% of all spam emails that are related to phishing. So, if we can use that as a proxy to suggest that they're getting about half of the phishing victims. So we can double our estimate and end up around $300 million lost per annum. So this is far less than the Gartner estimate, which estimates around $2 billion per annum just in the US alone. So I think a lot of this can be accounted for because we've very conservatively counted sites, and we've only counted what we've gotten from PhishTank. We've subsequently gotten other counts from different phishing feeds, and that suggests that the number of phishing sites is substantially more. The other explanation for it is that identity theft there are other causes of identity theft. It could be keyloggers, theft of the merchant databases, for example, losing 25 million records in the UK government, this sort of thing. Yeah, so it's hard to separate out that. It would be nice if these surveys of banks actually got more specific to the particular means of monetary loss, because they often have this information, they just aren't sharing it. If we look more closely at the lifetimes of banks, we can see that there's actually very great variation. I already showed you that log normal distribution. Some sites stick around forever, some move very quickly. If we then look at the performance of individual banks and of the ISPs which are hosting phishing sites, we see similar, very high variation. By publishing this kind of information, we can identify the exceptional performers, those who are very responsive to phishing attacks and removing sites, and those which are not. This shows the distribution of the number of phishing sites per brand. It's very skewed. PayPal, eBay, Bank of America are the highest targets, but then it continues on. There's a lot more sites which are target impersonated a few times. This is the lifetime distribution. And sorry, the x-axis is impossible to read, but those are bank names. And so you can see that the worst performer, which is Egg Bank, they have an average lifetime of around 180 hours. So that's about a week before they remove their phishing sites. And you might think, okay, that's all right. But then when you look, there are other banks which are doing a whole lot better. You have Flagstar, which gets its sites down in under 12 hours on average. So the performance could be improved. And I think one of the key things in reducing these information asymmetries is publishing good data which calls out this sort of thing and shows which bank is doing better. You have a question? Yeah.
Do you have data on how much each bank is spending to get this?
No, they keep this very closely guarded. What I do have information on is which banks are doing the takedowns themselves in-house, and which ones hire specialist takedown companies. Because we've gotten a couple of feeds from specialist companies whose sole business is taking down phishing sites, and they claim that there's a higher proportion of sites on the right-hand side which are paying these third-party providers versus the ones doing it in-house. And I've seen the data, and I agree that they seem to be right. But if you take that as a signal for spending money, because you probably have to spend more money if you're paying somebody else to do it. So yeah, connecting this to the investment is an open problem. So we also can look at particular ISPs, and we've done it for a large variation for all ISPs across the world. But I'm not going to talk about that today. I'll just look at the ones which are hosted on free web space, and you can see there's great variation. Yahoo is by far the best of the free web hosting sites. Their median takedown time is just around 7 hours. Some of the other sites tend to be longer, but all in all, this is all better than the standard the standard phishing sites because it's a free host, so they don't mind cutting off their customer because they're not paying them. So I want to probably sort of conclude by talking about this final effect here, which is what we've tracked is a number of the domains which have been targeted by rockfish attacks. You have on the top you have the .hk domain and the .cn domain, and this shows you the average site lifetime based upon the day in which it was reported. So on the left-hand side of the Hong Kong one, you'll see that there seems to be a whole lot of sites which lasted a very long time. This is at the beginning, whenever Hong Kong was first targeted by the rockfish. And you can see that they kind of just left them there for a long time. And then finally, towards the end of March, early April, they got their act together and decided, okay, this is a problem we have to deal with. And they killed them all. And they continue to be targeted, but the takedown time is better. It's still not very good, though. It's between 100 and 200 hours. But it's certainly better than the 700 hours that you were seeing at the beginning. And so, likewise, you can see this with .cn. In May, they kind of moved over to .cn, and you had a very bad response at first, and then it got better. I don't have the graph for it, but shortly after Hong Kong was targeted in early April, the Rockfish Gang moved on to Austria, moved on to nick.at, and started registering tons of domains. And this actually caused a bit of a fuss because .at was not responsive at all in removing the rockfish domains. They cite legal reasons because these are banks which are global and not Austrian brands. They did not have their legal department advice was that they could not actually remove the domains. And so they continued to hold this line for close to a month, and then Spamhaus, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, they issued a press release calling out nick.at by name and listing all of the live nick.at domains. And shortly thereafter, within a few days, the legal opinion changed, and now there aren't any more rockfish domains on .at. But I'm not trying to blame .at for this, because rather what happens here, this is a fairly common thing. You have when a domain registrar is first targeted, they're not sure how to respond to it. They don't do anything for a while, and then they kind of decide, okay, yes, we have to do something about it, and they figure out what to do, and they start doing it. And you see this sort of clued up effect repeatedly. And what the attackers are doing is they're moving over from domain registrar to domain registrar, just exploiting the lack of coordination between registrars. And they'll continue to be able to do this so long as there are more registrars to choose from. So we're dealing with an attacker which is quite adaptive. The Rockfish Gang have really benefited by cooperating and colluding together. They've come up with a system which impersonates many banks at one time, and it's quite resilient. And this probably should have actually attracted more attention from the banks themselves, because you've got 25 banks which are being hosted as an impersonator at a given time. But as it turns out, there is very little cooperation between the banks in removing the sites. I don't know. I think this could be because cooperation among defenders is hard, because you've got banks which have competing interests, and they might agree in principle that they should help, but they tend to focus on whenever they themselves are being targeted, which is actually completely understandable. I think with that I'll conclude. So in my talk I've just said that incentives explain the firm and end user behavior. You need to watch out for information security mechanisms being used as a tool to fight technological change. And I think measuring security incidents in a repeatable fashion is essential to mitigating problems and to providing better information about the threats that are out there and reducing these informational asymmetries. Every year there's a workshop on the economics of information security. It's been in the US all except for 1 year, unfortunately. Next year it's in New Hampshire in the US. It's generally a quite good event. And there's my webpage. And then finally there's our security